For the past month or so, I've been bringing a Comstar force to BattleTech nights at my local store. This video is going to cover my thoughts going into building that force, and then how it's performed across a few games. When I finish painting a miniature, I try to get in at least one game with it, and that's how this force started. Towards the beginning of May, I finished painting an Atlas, a Spartan, and a Battle Cobra for the Com Guards. The Atlas was earmarked for the Battle of Tukayid video that I did, but I wanted to get in a game with the others too. From that starting point of a Spartan and a Battle Cobra, I needed to figure out a 7,500 BV list to bring. I'd be using Comstar as the faction because that's how they're painted. And the Comstar version of the Battle Cobra Omnimech was introduced in 3063, and the Com Guards die out in 3080. So I'd effectively be looking at the late 3060s or the 3070s for this force. I'd also be working within the constraints of the miniatures I have painted for the Com Guards, which is only 15 of them, including these 3 new ones. For that time period, I had 2 Spartan variants and 7 Battle Cobra configurations to choose from. I started looking at the Spartan first because my choices were more limited there. First up was the Star League era Spartan SPTN-2. It's an 80-ton assault mech with a 5.8 movement profile, 224 armor points, 13 double heat sinks, an ERPPC, 3 medium pulse lasers, an anti-missile system, 2 Streak SRM-2s, and TAG. The newer Spartan SPTN-3 from the 3060s is pretty similar. It keeps the same 5.8 movement profile and 224 armor points. It does add a few heat sinks. And then on the weapons, it really just switches from medium pulse lasers to ER medium lasers. Then it drops the anti-missile system and adds an improved C3 computer. Knowing that the Battle Cobra also has a C3I computer in all of its configurations, I decided to go with the N3 and commit to building a networked force. Looking back at the set of units I had to work with, deciding to focus only on those units with C3I computers eliminated about half of the models I had available. In order to get the most out of a C3 network, I would want a mix of units in the force. I'd want some units that could get close to the enemy and spot, and then other units that would be able to take advantage of that from longer range. A good C3 spotter should have short-range firepower, the speed to get close fast, and then the ability to survive up close through either evasion or armor. Because the Com Guards didn't field Mercuries or Mongooses with C3I, I'd be looking at heavier spotters that would need to rely on their armor. Conveniently, the Spartan I had already committed to could fill that role as an assault mech with a 5.8 movement profile and some short-range weapons. In order to get some redundancy with a second spotter, I decided to look at the Exterminator. The Exterminator EXT-5E is a 65-ton mech with a 6.9 movement profile that can run 12 thanks to Mask. It has 208 armor and 10 double heat sinks. For weapons, it has 4 ER medium lasers and then an improved NARC launcher. The other variant available to my force, the EXT-5F, only changes out the weapons. It has 2 light PPCs, an MML-7, and an ER small laser. Knowing that I wouldn't have much use for homing beacons in my force, I decided to go with the EXT-5F. At this point, it was time for me to nail down which Battle Cobra configuration I'd be taking. The Comstar Battle Cobra is fairly vulnerable in a fight as a 40-ton mech that only has a 5.8 movement profile. That made me think it would be better suited to fighting at longer range and taking advantage of the C3 network for spotting rather than running into the mist of the enemy forces. The primary configuration has 2 large pulse lasers which give it accurate fire but only out to 10 hexes. The A configuration switches to a shorter range mix of lasers with 3 medium pulse lasers, 3 medium lasers, and a small pulse laser. It also carries an electronic suite with a TAG, a Guardian ECM, and a Beagle Active Pro. The B configuration carries 4 MRM-10s. MRMs are normally a lackluster weapon due to their range bands and their 2-hit penalty, but they actually pair very nicely with C3. The C configuration only comes with a pair of improved NARC launchers. The D configuration is a sniper with 4 light PPCs connected to a targeting computer. The E configuration is a missile boat with 2 MML-9s that can fire either long or short-range missiles. Then the last option I have is the F configuration, which has 2 plasma rifles. Those do decent damage and inflict heat on their targets. Of all of these, the B configuration is the one that caught my eye. Being able to do 40 damage out to 15 hexes is pretty good with the MRMs, and they pair nicely with the C3I system. It also comes in at a much lower BV than the sniper variants with the light PPCs or the plasma rifles. At this point, I was looking for one more mech to add to the force. I wanted another long-range sniper to take advantage of the C3 network. Given the constraints I had around availability and a remaining BV, there were really only 2 variants for me to consider. The first was the Crab CRB-30. It's a 50-ton mech with a 5.8 movement profile. It has 161 armor points and 14 double heat sinks. It's armed with 2 ER PPCs which give it a nice long-range punch, and then an ER medium laser and an ER small laser to back it up. Then it has the improved C3 computer and a Guardian ECM which might be useful for ECCM. The thing that made me worry about this one, though, was that its 2 ER PPCs generate 30 heat, and the 14 double heat sinks can't even deal with that. The other option I had was the Lancelot LNC 2504. It's a 60-ton mech with a 6'9 movement profile, 179 armor points, and 14 double heat sinks. It has an ER PPC and 2 ER large lasers. It can't fire all of those without overheating drastically, but it could consistently fire 1 ER PPC and 1 ER large laser while managing its heat levels. And then it also had the improved C3. With the Lancelot better armored, faster, and able to consistently shoot at least 2 of its big guns, I decided to go with it. With that choice made, my force was ready. I'd have a Spartan, an Exterminator, a Lancelot, and a Battle Cobra, all linked in a C3I network. For battle value, I had to add 283 to each unit's base BV in order to account for the C3I network. That left me with enough budget that I could improve everybody's piloting skill to 4. And in the end, I came to a total of 7,461 BV for the force, which is perfect for a 7,500 point game. My first game with this force went surprisingly well. We were playing the No Man's Land scenario with an objective of holding the center line of the battlefield. My Spartan and Exterminator were able to claim the objective while my Battle Cobra and Lancelot took up good firing positions and were able to take advantage of the improved accuracy of the C3 network. The Battle Cobra ended up being the MVP by destroying the Wolverine with across-the-board MRMs that went through its back armor. At the end of the game, I was a clear winner on the objective, and the only enemy unit still standing was the Spider, while I still had 3 of my mechs in play. My next game with this force went the opposite way. This time we were playing the hold the line scenario and wanted to get our units over to the opposite side of the board. My opponent brought 2 fast jumpers, an Eris and a Wraith, and they proved to be a pretty strong counter to my strategy. They could quickly get into position to harass my snipers, and the combination of TMMs of 4 and plenty of woods to jump into meant I had a hard time hitting them even when at short range. At the end of the game, both of my units that were on the right side of the board to score had fallen over, so I badly lost with 0 points earned. I had only lost 1 mech completely, but it definitely felt like I was struggling the entire battle. At this point I decided to make some adjustments. The minimum range on the Exterminator's light PPCs had been bothering me, so I decided to try swapping in the EXT-5E. I still didn't have any use for homing pods on the Einarch, so I would be taking a mix of explosive, haywire, and ECM pods instead. Then I also decided to give the Crab a try. The Lancelot had performed fine, but the second large laser was really wasted BV since I only had fired it once in 2 games. With those adjustments, I actually had freed up enough battle value that I was able to switch the Battle Cobra's skills from 4-4 to 3-5 that would essentially erase the 2-hit penalty of the MRMs. This new force was 10 tons lighter and came in at a total of 7,465 BV. My game with this version of the list was mixed. The scenario was No Man's Land again, but this time my opponent had a couple of clan mechs with high BVs that meant I really couldn't contest the objective. Instead, I played to kill. I took a beating from his firepower, but by the end of the game I feel like I came out on top with his Hellbringer gone, his Kingfisher pilot knocked out, and the Kit Fox missing a leg. The switch to the Exterminator 5e proved a good choice because my opponent had an ECM suite on the Kingfisher. An early hit with an ECM pod in ECCM mode shut that down and let me use the C3 network unimpeded. Hitting it with a Haywire pod just after that was a nice bonus too. The Crab, on the other hand, struggled. Building up heat just by firing both of its ERPPCs felt bad and limited its effectiveness. I could also feel that it was slower than the Lancelot. While I definitely didn't win the game based on objectives, I was happy with how my force performed overall and definitely liked the Exterminator 5e in play more than the 5F. My unhappiness with the Crab CRB-30 led me to swap back in the Lancelot while keeping the EXT-5e Exterminator. In order to stay within my BV budget, I had to downgrade the skills on the Battle Cobra to 4-5 this time. And that put me at a total of 245 tons and a battle value of 7,405 for the force. I played a game with this version of the force, but unfortunately forgot to take any pictures of it. We used the Headhunter mission, and my Spartan was the commander for my force. It did well in that role, but overall I kinda struggled with the game. My opponent had 2 units with ECM suites, a Raven that could also use it for stealth armor, and then an Awesome. And I kind of made a mistake in my deployment, and my Exterminator wasn't well positioned to get to the Awesome quickly enough to use a pod to neutralize its ECM suite. With my C3 network disrupted, I felt pretty outgunned throughout the entire game. My Spartan then went down before I was able to take out the enemy Awesome, so I lost the objective. After my experiences with this list, I have some lessons learned for using C3. The first is that even in a faction known for using C3, looking at only those for force building really limits your selection of units. My second takeaway is that while C3 really improves your accuracy at range, it doesn't help at all up close. This means that fast jumpers are still going to be a problem because you're firing at your base skill even at short range. You're going to want pulse or precision autocannon ammunition or some other way to deal with these fast jumpers. Third, based on my experiences in these games, I think improved NARC ECCM pods are a great way to deal with enemy ECM that could be disrupting your C3 network. But my final takeaway is that unless you really lean into ECCM capabilities, facing a force that has multiple ECM units on the field is going to really be a problem. Your C3 network is going to be disrupted for a good part of the game, and that means you're wasting a lot of BV on something you're not able to use. Given the constraints of 7,500 BV, Comstar in the 3070s, and using C3I, what would you bring to the table? If you have ideas, or have had success using C3 of any flavor, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more from me, you can subscribe here on YouTube or at scottsgameroom.com. You can also support the channel on Patreon.